It's often exciting to look to the future of UNO, what it might be like in times to come. Sometimes, though, it's important to stop and take a good look at the past of the university, the people and the happenings that help make the excitement of future history possible. With this in mind, join me for Reflections in Time. It's a rather snowy, dark day here in February of 1986. And I'm in a building that the gentleman who's with me here didn't know about many years ago when he came to the university. The series you're about to watch is another in what we call Reflections in Time. We've been doing this for a number of years now, and in '86 we're continuing it, and we're doing it with my friend Jim Petersen, who spent much of his life, and he's back here now in sort of semi-retirement, again doing some work with our University of Nebraska at Omaha, but as he remembers it, of course, the University of Omaha. Jim, it's so nice to have you with me, looking hale and hearty and ready to go and take a look at the past.
Well, I'm very pleased to do this.
You know, Jim, first of all, I think often when I visit with people about this, I start with their time of coming to the university. But I'd like to start back before that and probe your mind for all your memories of the early life of this university, not only as it relates to the music department, which you headed for so many years, but just generally the university. Pick it up wherever you'd like, back in history, some of your first memories of it as you knew it and as you'd heard of it.
Well, I remember that my mother was extremely interested in this university becoming municipal. It was then a nominally Presbyterian college, really a college of arts and sciences. That's all it was, with the business department and the science department and so forth.
Yeah.
And I went from door to door distributing leaflets urging the people of Omaha to vote for a municipal university, and I believe that it was a 1 meal tax at that time.
Now, what year are we talking about, Jim?
Well, we're talking
about
around 1930, back in there. I don't remember precisely.
Right after the crash, really.
Really?
We were in the Depression at the time.
Oh, yes.
This vote came to be.
Things were very depressed for my family. My father was a doctor, and no patients were paying.
Yeah. Now, you're an Omaha boy.
Yes, I was born and raised here, and I went through Central High School, Dundee School, Central High School, and the University of Omaha.
You know, I think one thing I'd like to ask you, because it has changed so much in the years that you and I have been here, not only the university, but the city. What was the city like that you remember first as a little boy?
Well, 50th Street was way out.
Is that sort of out of town?
Sort of out of town, and I remember we used to take Sunday drives in the spring to go out as far as Peony Park to look at the peonies, and it really was a peony farm.
And that's where the name came from.
That's where the name came from.
Now that's fun for me, yeah.
And it was a gravel road out there. Then, of course, about the time I came back to Omaha, the Crossroads was built.
Yes, you left for a number of years.
But I was gone for several years, from 1938 to 1953.
Now, during some of those times, you were a schoolboy and did other things. Let's hear about that early life for a little while there, Jim.
Well, it was the Depression, as we have said.
Yeah.
And I received a tuition scholarship. I don't remember how much it was, but to the university. And I worked in a dance band at nights.
Oh, you were already into music here.
Oh, I was into music. Oh, yes, ever since I was 7.
Oh, that started with family encouragement then, and lessons and that sort of thing?
A very, very dominant mother who would keep a lath on the piano, and if I stomped and wanted to go out and play, I had the lath around my seat
So you were regular in your attendance at
I
the
was
piano.
very regular in my attendance in practicing. I practiced before I went to school, and lunch, and right after school. Mother was determined I was going to be a musician. I wanted to be a doctor, but I couldn't hack the math.
And Mother prevailed.
Mother prevailed.
Well, it would sound like being forced to practice and all. You might get tired of it all, Jim.
Well, no, it just happened, sort of. I just went into it naturally.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't pass high school chemistry, so
that suggested
that killed the doctor idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to be a partner with my dad, but I just fell into music.
Did you come from a big family or a small family?
No, I was an only child.
Oh.
And my dad was one of 2 children. My mother was one of 4. But I was the only child and spoiled, and I had a happy childhood here in Omaha.
And you say you went to Central High School?
Yes, I went there and graduated in about 1932.
Well, right about the time that we were talking about in relation to this university.
And then I really wasn't too anxious to go back to school because I hadn't had such a happy time in high school. Although I was in everything musical there. Band, orchestra, road show, all the musicals.
But that chemistry and some things, that wasn't much fun.
That was no fun at all. I can keep my checkbook straight, but mathematically I'm not a wizard.
I know the feeling.
Yeah. No, then I went to Central, graduated, and then without any arithmetic. I had to make up my mathematics before I graduated from the university. But
you were heading for the university.
I was heading for the university, and my mother said, "You're going to go to the university," and I said, "I am not going back to school. I am not."
You really didn't want to.
She took me kicking and screaming out and registered me for an English course, and I found it absolutely fascinating. And next semester I went full time
to this university. You remember that was about 1930.
About 1933. And it was out on West 24th Street.
Yes. Now let's pause there a little bit, Jim, because you were a student out there. A lot of the people we remember from our days together here were also out there years ago. But tell us a little about that campus as you remember.
Well, it consisted of 2 buildings, a gym, and an administration building. I don't remember what, Jocelyn Hall, I believe it was called.
I think you're right.
And then there was a hut, a prefab for the library, set between these 2 buildings. Then you walked 6 blocks to Ames Avenue for science courses.
24th and Ames?
24th and Ames. Or music department was moved out to the science building.
Oh, so that was a little off campus.
That was a little off campus, and you had to hurry to get up there in the 10 minutes between classes.
Oh, that's quite a move in 10 minutes, 6 blocks, yeah.
But the building was, even when I was there, seemed awfully old, and the stairs worn. And
no, the year you were there, really the university wasn't very old, really, was it?
No. As a matter of fact, the music department, when this university was private, was a conservatory of music with Cecil Berryman, the piano teacher, as chairman of the Conservatory of Music.
You mean it was a separate entity, really?
Separate entity attached to the university.
But not really a part of it?
Not really a part of it. And
had it been going as a conservatory for many years?
For quite a while. I really don't remember how many years it was, but it was a good many years. And then when the university became municipal, they completely reorganized, did away with a separate conservatory and made a department of music, and took on Martin Bush as the chairman.
I remember him very well.
And there were three people on the staff at that time, I believe.
But we'll come back up to that. I'm so interested in what you were sharing there that I think a lot of people do not know, Jim, and that is the way the department really got started. And it was out of a conservatory that was within but yet separate from our university.
Right. And then it became a department of music with Mr. Bush, Miss Cahoe, and then Mr. Cox, my fiddle teacher, was a part-time instructor.
Now, Jim, back when you were first a student at the University of Omaha, as we well remember it, not the University of Nebraska at Omaha, were you then, as you came back to college rather grudgingly, Mom wanted you to come, you didn't want to come, did you start out with an idea of pursuing music then, or did that come a little later?
Well, that came a little later. It was the only major that I was interested in, and so I just became a music major almost automatically.
By now, had you been continuing with your piano lessons?
No, my fiddle lessons.
Oh, you'd moved over to the violin?
I started out on the violin.
Even before piano?
Oh, yes. I can't play piano.
I was assuming that you know, with the stick and mother, that I visualized you by the piano. You started with the violin. She played the piano.
Yes, she played the piano. And she sat at the piano, and I practiced with her.
Well, that made it a little hard for you to leave. You had your mother and your accompanist close by.
I say. But getting back to the university, I took a degree mostly in music education.
With the idea of being a teacher? With the idea of
being a teacher, music
teacher.
Do
you recall what prompted you to want to be a teacher, which you spent much of your life doing?
Well, I don't know, really. I don't know what was prompting me. It just seemed to be the best way to go, and I needed some form of employment. And that's the only thing I could think of. I couldn't be a doctor, and I wasn't interested in business. And that was seemingly the best opportunity available to you. It was the best opportunity available. Well, now the time you were going to school there, Jim, you know, times are pretty hard. Yes. And I think it was something like $3 to $5 a credit hour. Is that right? And it was a real advantage to have the university. Oh, indeed so. Because I couldn't afford to go to a conservatory. My father could not afford to send me. What was bus fare in those days, Jim? About a nickel? Nickel. Yeah. Only it was a streetcar. Did you eat on campus? Did they have a dining room? No, there was a sort of what they called a shack not too far. I usually carried my lunch. Brought your lunch from home, which was a saving too, of course. Which was a saving. And my father was very, very good to me. Many times I rode the streetcar going out there, but many times he'd let me use the car. He was very generous with his car. What part of the city did you live in? We lived on 58th Street, not far from Elmwood Park. Well, pretty much the edge of town then, wasn't it? Oh, yes, we were. Right south of what became the campus we're now sitting on as we record this. That's exactly right. Just east of it. Yeah. Do you remember, people are so interesting, as you both and I both agree, back there when you were a student, what are some of the people who stand out in that early campus when you were a student? Well, names again. The dean of the college, Dean Holt, was a fine teacher. I had him for several history courses. And I used to, when he dolled up in his academic regalia, he looked to me like a bishop, and I started calling him the bishop. And one day he called me into his office, and he said, "What's this business about calling me bishop?" And I said, "Simply, Dean Holt, because you look like a bishop when you're all in your regalia." And he laughed, and he said, "Well, all right." He accepted that. He accepted that, and then there was Miss Smith, who became registrar while I was... Alice? Alice Smith. I remember her well. And Oh, of course, Dr. Thompson, and there was an English teacher that I liked very much, a woman.
Uh-huh. Well, maybe you'll think of her name later.
Maybe
on
I'll remember her name later.
Pick it up. But it was a small faculty, wasn't it?
It was a small faculty, but Dr. Payne and Dr. Garlow.
Were they there when you came or after you came as a student?
When I came.
So they were here for really a long time.
They were here for a long time, and it's a miracle that the university kept them because they were such brilliant men.
Did you have them both?
I had them both. And
did Garlow make you enjoy science a little more?
He really made it very interesting. He was such a bright man.
Wasn't he a wonderful person?
He was a wonderful person, and he was so good to me when I first came to the university to teach. But I remember them very well.
I'll let you think about this for just a moment or two, Jim, because by the very nature of what we're doing here as we record these reflections in time, we take a little pause now and then so we can reload the machine and get more tape. Well, as we finished that first segment of our tape together on reflections, Jim, we were talking about your reflections about the old campus for the University of Omaha at North 24th Street, and at the time you were kind of fumbling around for one of the names of a teacher you liked but you just couldn't remember.
Well, one of them was Mildred Gerhardt, who taught English.
Mm-hmm.
And another one was Dr. Boyce, who also taught English. I don't know where he went, but I think that he was here the first few years that Dr. Wardle came.
Oh.
They sort of overlapped. They were very good friends. He was a brilliant man. But otherwise, I don't remember any students who continued to be connected with the university.
Now, you know, one thing I wanted to ask you about that campus, though, was since you've spent your life in music, really, pretty much, and started out, as we were talking a few minutes ago, as a boy in it, really, as a young boy. What was the university like in music in those early days? What did it have, and who did it have?
It had Martin Bush and a Miss Cahill. Now, Mr. Bush taught advanced harmony, and Miss Cahill taught music education and music history. And it was a basic music course. That is, we don't do too much differently here.
Well, in those days, was it possible for a person like you to get a music major?
Oh yes, I got a music major, and by that time they had a Bachelor of Fine Arts in art and in music.
And by now, the university's music department was the university's department, wasn't it?
It was the university department, and they had a BFA degree, which I received.
Did that happen while you were there? That change from the conservatory?
So. I think it. I think they got that degree while I was there, but I know I graduated with it. I was in the first class that graduated from the Arts and Sciences building here.
Ah, well now, here it was, we had a new building and you were out, you'd moved with the campus, but about the time you graduated from the university, we were still in the depths of the Depression, weren't we?
Yes,
or 1938 or so, things were not very good yet, and the war was coming on the scene.
Yes, I was in New England when the war struck.
Yeah, where did you first go as you left Omaha, and what did you do, or what hope you hope to do?
Very fortunate. I was extremely fortunate. I graduated, and I was hunting madly for a job. I was offered a job in Winnemucca, Nevada, as teacher of music and bus driver. Now that didn't appeal to me. And then I received a call that Mr. Hirschler was interviewing people for a job in the music department of Emporia College, not Emporia State, but Emporia College, College of Emporia,
yeah.
which was a Presbyterian school. And I interviewed for it and got the job. So I went to Emporia and taught music there for 2 years. Then I went on to Eastman, had a scholarship there. And
so you really taught in the early stages at college, really?
Oh yes, I never did teach in a high school, and I think it's too bad, but I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. So you were there a couple of years.
There a couple of years.
And then you were off to
Eastman School of Music for a year, and then I went to New Hampshire to teach in a Colby Junior College, a junior college for women. It's now, I guess, both men and women.
It's a co-educational school now, isn't it? I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on April 1st, the Army got me.
Oh, so you've been teaching a number of years when you went in service. Well, did you go in as a musician or just as one of the good old buck privates?
I went in as an infantryman.
Aha. Tell us about life in the service. I never realized you'd spent all these years in the service.
Oh, yes. I went into artillery first. I was sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And I was scheduled to be a radio man because I was being a musician, supposed to be able to pick up the Morse code, which I couldn't very well. But I had taken oboe lessons for a while, so the band took me. And I stayed in the band until I was sent to Camp Barkley, Texas, in the artillery band.
About what year would this have been, Jim?
Oh dear, 40
or 41?
41, about.
Uh-huh.
And then the infantry band and the artillery band were merged, and so I was infantry.
Oh.
And then from there we did our usual maneuvering in the desert and in Louisiana.
What sorts of things did you do in service as a band? Did you play concerts? Did you play reveille? What?
We played concerts and not reveille, but we did do reviews.
Oh, when they had big parades.
Oh, big reviews. I think once or twice a week.
Oh.
With the 90th Infantry. And when we went to Europe, into England.
And now you'd laid the musical instruments down, or were you still playing?
In the concert band, I played oboe.
Yeah.
And in the marching band, I played glockenspiel, which is a set of bells like this.
Yes.
And the fellows always kidded me. They said, when your grandchildren ask what you did in the war, you can say, I played hot glock.
And you did.
And I did. But then in England, we put our instruments away, and some of our men became MPs. Many of them became medics. And I was put with the forward echelon to take care of the records of the band.
A record keeper.
And that's what I was doing all during the war, following Patton around.
So you were on the move and in the thick of it, but not in the ordinarily fighting soldier's position.
Right. That's right.
Interesting view of the war.
Very.
What kind of memories do you have of service, Jim?
Well, not entirely happy.
No.
But I didn't like being strafed. I didn't like being 88'd. I hated that sound.
Yeah, you could hear it.
And but by and large, I was very fortunate. We had some tussles, but we came out.
And lost some good friends along the way, I can imagine.
Very good friends, right.
But the war was an interesting and exciting time for us young men, wasn't it, compared to some of the more recent wars?
Oh, yes.
It was the thing to be in, wasn't it?
We all knew what we were there for.
Oh, my. There was no lack of purpose, was there?
No. Fortunately, there wasn't. Although we complained, as you well know, because we never knew what we were why we were doing what we were doing. But then after the war, I got back into teaching,
Where did you came back to America, to your homeland? And
I came back to Omaha, as a matter of
did
fact.
Did you?
And I taught, Miss Cahill became disabled. She took sick with something or other.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Bush asked me to teach some theory courses here.
Oh, so that was your beginning of attachment as
to UNO,
teacher to the university?
OOU. And then from there, I went to Mississippi and then to Georgia.
Oops. What did we do down in Mississippi?
Oh, we had a band.
Oh.
And Mississippi Southern College, now the University of Southern Mississippi.
Yes.
I taught there 1 year. And the chairman of the department was not particularly a good friend.
Is that a way of saying you didn't get along too well?
We didn't get along at all. He had spies in every class, and he would call me in and tell me what I had done, right or wrong, mostly wrong. But I had a good band. And then I hunted madly for a job and got one in Rome, Georgia.
Rome, Georgia?
Yes.
At another college or
another
university?
college, shorter college.
Is shorter?
No, shorter.
Is it a private school?
Baptist. And I was an Episcopalian.
Oh, but they let you in.
But they let me in. I taught there for 2 years, and then that music department just blew up. There was a big hassle at the top, and then from there I went to Midland College.
Oh, now you're getting back close to home again.
Getting back close to home. And from Midland College, I taught there 2 years.
Teaching theory and
teaching
basic
theory,
things?
and I had a band, and we had a good band. And
you had a lot of attachments to band, both as a player and as a conductor.
Oh yes. I was a bandsman for a long time. Then we were starving gracefully because salaries were anything but good. I think it was $3,000 a year, and we just couldn't make it on that with a wife and a child.
Oh, so when had we acquired the rest of the family? We sort of messed up here, didn't we?
My wife was Patricia Bush. She was Martin Bush's daughter.
Yes, that's right.
And we went together as steadies in the university.
When you were students together?
When we were students here.
Oh, is that right?
And I went away, and then we sort of lost track of one another. And then the war broke out, and we started writing again, and we were married during the war.
Oh, were you?
Before I went overseas.
So you were married while you were in service?
And then later on, when we were in Rome, Georgia, we had a daughter. So that's where I picked up my family.
Now we have the family in place. You went to this Baptist school as an Episcopalian, then came back to Midland, went with the Lutherans?
Lutherans, and I was directed the Episcopal Church choir there. But they were the Lutherans.
You were very ecumenical, weren't you?
Oh, extremely ecumenical. And
but the finances were such it just wasn't.
It just wasn't possible. So I got an assistantship at the University of Iowa.
Oh.
And worked there for 2 years. And
what year are we talking about now?
We had
in the 50s somewhere.
PhD in 58. 53. PhD in 53. And I got it in 53. And
you settled into graduate work there to finish your doctorate.
Yes, I got my doctorate. And Mr. Bush retired in 53, and I was interviewed. Dr. Bale interviewed me for the job here, and for some reason or other, I got it.
Did your father-in-law give you a good recommendation?
Well, apparently. Apparently.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so.
So then you came back.
Then I came back here to stay.
In 1953. Oh, yeah. Now, here we come back to university. You'd gone and you had come. You had been away as a student. You were married and had a child, and you'd done lots of things, including the service life. When you came back in the early 50s, really, what was the university like then, physically and otherwise?
Well,
let's talk about it then.
Physically, we had two buildings. The administration building, the one with the cupola on it, and the field house. And that was it.
Weren't there any of our permanent temporary buildings around?
Not that I can remember.
All right.
Not that I can remember. The parking lot east of the now Arts and Sciences building was reserved for faculty, and with our names on parking places, believe it or not,
Yes.
and no fee attached.
No.
But there were just the two buildings. We did our musical things in the auditorium, now the theater.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
everything was in that auditorium, wasn't it?
everything was in there.
Games, concerts.
Oh, it was a gym as well
Yeah.
for a while.
It must have been a busy place.
It was. And then Dr. Clark, Ed Clark, approached me about doing musicals. And so we started many, many years of musical comedies.
Oh, I remember some of them. Marvelous years.
Yes, they were. And he was a wonderful friend and wonderful to work with.
And it really was a cooperative venture between theater and music
Mm-hmm.
in doing those plays, wasn't it?
It was. I did the orchestra and conducted the performance. He prepared it. But then came the Student Center.
Yeah, but before we get to the Student Center, I want to know, when you came back to teach in our area here and be with the university, what was the Department of Music like then?
Well,
What did you offer? How big was it?
we offered the Bachelor of Fine Arts, and we had 3 faculty members.
3 faculty members.
There was the choral director, myself, and the band director. And we split the curriculum up between us.
Yeah, now, how many courses did you all teach along with directing all those things?
Well, there were times when the faculty member now would revolt. We taught as many as 18 to 20 hours in addition to what else we were doing.
This would, I would think, make a lot of time away from family.
It certainly did. And I was playing in the symphony orchestra at that time, too. And I wasn't home very much.
Now, were you at least getting a salary that you and the family could live on?
We got along. We got along. It wasn't a fantastic salary, but it was much better.
Well, you know what, Jim? We've come to another point where we're paused for just a minute, and we'll pick it up as we come back on the third segment of our Tape Together in Reflections, as we look at the university in those early years when you were a member of our faculty here on a full-time basis now.
Right.
I was wondering, Jim, as we continue visiting about these matters in the early stages of your time here, full-time at the university, when a man or woman came to you and your faculty of 3, what could they major in? What were some of the emphases they could have as a student?
Well, they could, mostly music education.
Most of them were going into teaching.
Most of them were going into teaching. And we had a lot of women who had just become widows or whose incomes, their family incomes needed jacking up, who came to take degrees in music education and went out to teach.
Was there quite a demand in those years, in the early
yes.
50s, for music teachers?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we never had any trouble placing one. They were placed mostly in Omaha. Many of the teachers, including the supervisor of music in Omaha, was our graduate.
Oh, is that right? Now, with these future music teachers, that suggests that we had practice teachers out during part of their time here. Did that mean, along with everything else that you people were doing,
yes.
that you had to supervise them too?
The first new faculty member I ever hired was Ray Trenholm.
Ah, Raymond.
And he was a fine teacher. He supervised all the music education.
So that took part of that load.
That took
this
that
was an
load.
additional faculty member, now you were up to
Yes,
4?
my first additional faculty member. And then when the library was built, which was the next on the agenda.
And we mean the library now over in the middle of the old campus next to
now
Arts
the
and Science
administration
Hall.
building, yes.
Ah.
When that was built, what was her name? At any rate, I put forth a proposition to President Bale, including plans on how to revamp the old library space into a department of music. And he seemed to be very pleased with it. We didn't get it, but we did get a small brick building on the south side of the field house.
Yeah, I know you had this appendage to the field house, sort of a barn-like structure, but at least it was a place for practice and work.
Oh, it was. We had a rehearsal and teaching room, and then later when we kept growing, and then we added more faculty. The next faculty member to be added was Kern Peters. And then we had a full-time piano teacher for a change. All of our applied music, that is, lessons in various instruments, was done in the city, and the students were examined by somebody from out of town.
Oh.
And then they were given credit for their lessons.
You mean their work was out in various schools and other organizations and groups?
No, their work was with the private music teachers in Omaha.
With the private music, oh.
And that became quite a burden because we had no control over quality. Of course, many of the teachers were very fine, but some of them that these students went to were quite questionable. So
it wasn't a good learning situation.
No, it wasn't. Really wasn't. And they almost became split personalities with loyalties to the university on one hand and to their teacher on the other.
So that needed to change.
And it meant that we should change. And finally we did. We managed more music majors, and then we added a teacher of singing, and then we added more applied music teachers until we had a department of about 8.
So you had more than doubled in size.
We had doubled
in how many years approximately, Jim?
Oh, in about 10 years.
Well, now, that's an interesting period. You came in the early 50s, really, back to your alma mater full time. And the growth then was tremendous. I know we grew as a university during that time generally. But do you have any special remembrance of why, specifically, our music program really sort of took off?
I think it's probably because there was a need for it. And so many of our students, as you know, can't afford to go to an Ivy League university or even down to Lincoln.
Right. Because
of board and room and other various costs. So we felt a very definite need for a university that had a full-fledged music department. Creighton didn't. It never has had a real music department. So we were the only one in the territory.
So that would be quite attractive
as
we grew with it.
Extremely attractive.
Yeah.
And the kids could work, the students could work as they do now. And go to school, get their degrees, and go out to teach. We have so many out in the field now.
You mentioned that during that period you feel one of the real reasons for growth was the demand. Was the demand mainly for teachers or professional musicians or music teachers out of their home or studio or what?
The trouble is in the music game that the market for performers is very limited, almost minuscule. But the demand for teachers, while it's not good now, particularly, is always more or less stable. And unless someone is counting on going forward with master's and doctorate, he had better get himself a teaching certificate if he or she is going to exist after they get out of school, because they're not going to as performers. They might possibly as private teachers.
Is it true that a lot of students come to a university like ours even now, as well as back in those years, wanting to be performers?
There are some. And there are some who want to deal only with theory and composition, or some who deal only with music history. But mostly those are students who have gone the graduate degree route. Some of them are teaching in universities around the country now. and colleges. But we never had too terribly much trouble placing them.
Now, as you described there a few minutes ago, Jim, really in that period there wasn't much competition in our area.
Except
we were it, pretty much.
That's in the Omaha area.
Yeah.
Except for Lincoln.
Uh-huh.
And they, of course, have and did at that time the idea that they were the only music department in the state that was acceptable. And we had a lot of trouble with them.
What sorts of trouble?
Well, they would go into the school system here, they'd send their performers, they were out beating the bushes for students too.
Sure.
And they would ask, where are you going? Well, if anybody suggested they were going to Omaha University, they'd say, well, you shouldn't go there, it's not accredited.
Which was not really so.
Which was not so, because I went through the master's and the doctorate, I never lost a credit. And I've seen students from other universities, Lincoln included, who had them peeled off by the dozen because they were unacceptable to graduate programs. But
so we had a bit of a competitive battle going on there.
We had a lot of competitive battling going on.
Did you feel at that time, in the 50s, in those late 50s, as you expanded the department, as you were growing, that we had a really pretty good, solid department?
Yes, we've always had a very solid department. And I think that's one of the reasons why many students came to us. It's a solid program.
Did we draw a majority of those from the Omaha area that were quite talented in the musical areas? Did we draw pretty well from Omaha?
Not so much in performance. We drew primarily from Omaha, and at that time from Council Bluffs. We had a lot of Iowa students until the regents passed the rule that their tuition was so high.
Till the merger, why?
Till the merger.
Yeah, we'll come to the merger after a bit, but that really can make a difference in the composition of our student body, wouldn't it? In lots of departments.
We lost a lot of students.
Yeah, we really were heavily involved with Iowa in a way that has not been recouped, really, since the change to Municipal University.
Well, for example, Martha Scheel, who was the prima donna in the last opera, was one of our students up until the time that the merger took place. And she went elsewhere. We lost other students that we didn't want to lose because of that.
That made a real difference. Now, in those periods, when you came here, of course, Dr. Bale was the head of the university.
Very much so. The head.
Yeah. Now, you hadn't really known Dr. Bale because he was not here when you left, was he?
No.
So I suppose you'd heard about him and knew a little of him, but
I didn't know too terribly much about him, but I soon became very well acquainted with him and with his carpet.
Oh yeah. Let's it's nice on these tapes to get the impressions of the various people who dealt with him. And as the head of musical activity, you had reason to talk to him on occasion. What were some of your first impressions and general impressions of Dr. Bale?
Tyranny was my first impression and remained an impression. And I was chairman of the department, but when it came to choral music and band music, I had no say in who was to be hired. None.
He made the decision completely?
He made the decision. As a matter of fact, when Mr. Miller, now Dr. Miller, who's out of the community church, was brought here, I was invited to a luncheon to see this new man, and Dr. Bale simply said to me, "Here's your new choral director." And Jack Malik was an special pet of Dr. Bale's. Jack could do no wrong so far as Dr. Bale was concerned.
The band man.
The band man. And
which was your forte by background.
By background, but according to Dr. Bale, I didn't know anything about it.
Well, this made for sort of an uncomfortable situation for you, didn't it?
Extremely uncomfortable.
Did people like this have sort of a double allegiance then to you and to the president in a sort of a different way?
Well, I never knew what was going on with the chorus, and I never knew what was going on in the band, because everything was dealt with directly with the president.
So really, he was sort of his own music department head then.
He ran everything.
Is there any special reason for that? Now, he didn't do that in all departments, but did he have a special liking or feeling for music?
He felt the music department was the gold handle on the outhouse door.
Uh-huh.
And he ordered me to do many things, like play for this occasion and that occasion. And when he was made king of Exarban, he called me in and told me I was to have a group play at his reception, non-alcoholic reception.
Mm-hmm.
And I had played so many of those King of Exarban and Queen of Exarban receptions, and they all were very liquid. But anyhow, that's beside the point. And then I informed him that in order to have a group, I didn't have the performers, the student performers. I'd have to hire outside people. And he didn't like this at all. But he said, go ahead. And I hired a nice group who had always played these occasions.
That you'd worked with before?
That I worked with many years. And he handed me the check. He called me in and handed me the check, and I said, I don't want you to pay me. I want to do it for you. He said, any workman is worth his hire. And he dismissed me.
Insisted. Huh?
Insisted. Well, anyhow, he apparently was more or less pleased because I got tenure when it was, and regular promotions, and it wasn't a year that we didn't get a salary increase.
And in those days, those decisions on tenure and everything were really pretty made by him, weren't they?
They were made by him, absolutely, with certain recommendations, but I don't think he took the recommendations very seriously. At any rate, I did get promotion and tenure and salary raises all the time, so he must have been fairly happy.
But for whatever reason, the public portion of departmental activity, he liked to keep a hold of that.
Absolutely. He kept a firm hold on
Did this make any difference in your relationships with him because of the other side, the academic, and in many ways the more important side?
He didn't bother too much about the academic.
Ah.
But when we bought a piano to put in one of the in a couple of the practice rooms in our little shanty, he called me in. He said, now these have to be amortized, so you will charge. And he told me how much, and it was an impossible figure, $75 a semester or something, just for using piano to practice on. And I said, it can't be done. It just simply can't be done. You will do it. And so, as a consequence, we never rented a piano.
You just didn't rent the piano?
We just didn't rent them.
So at times there were hindrances as well as help.
Oh, yes. The man was a builder, and he did build the university. But he certainly had the handlebars all the way.
You felt a little bit enclosed then under his leadership, really?
Extremely so. And Dr. Trawick and the mess about the additional mill levy, which we all felt he had mishandled, wasn't too much better, because I was told that we would have an opera department, and that his good friend from Missouri, Dr. Ritz, would become our teacher there. So that's what we had.
Now we've come to the end of another segment, and we'll pick it up with these days of change and possibility, and the strengths and some of the weaknesses, the problems you were wrestling with, as we change tapes and take a little break here as we look at the past through your eyes, Jim Petersen.